Welcome to the Sort It Out SI League Guide for Italy, where we'll look at the league structure within Football Manager 2023 and run through a few save ideas if you want to start your career in Italy. On FM23, Italy has just 3 playable levels, but despite this, there are 5 divisions and a total of 100 playable teams. Now, as you'll probably be aware, the season in Italy is a traditional European winter season, so runs from roughly August all the way through to June, and we're going to cover all of the levels of the playable pyramid, including European qualification and the domestic cup competitions. Now, we start our guide with the top tier, Serie A, which is a 20-team league, which plays a double round-robin schedule for a 38-game campaign. In the first season, Italy has 7 European qualification places. 6 automatically go to the league, with the 7th being awarded to the winner of the Coppa Italia, which we'll cover later in this video, with the usual caveat of the league position of the winner, and it will drop down and there'll be 7 in the league if the winner is in the top 4, basically. But we'll cover all that later. At the other end of the Serie A table, there are 3 relegation places down to the second tier, and they're all automatic. But there is one new thing for Serie A introduced this season. It's new for tie-breaking for certain league positions, those league positions being 1st and 17th and 18th. So if you are tied 1st and 2nd, or tied 17th and 18th, so the last relegation place, there is a new rule for breaking that tie. In those cases, a playoff at a neutral venue will be used to break the tie and award either the title or the relegation, depending on which tie we're breaking. So keep an eye on that. If you are level on points in either of those key positions, you'll get an extra game at the end of the season. Now, there's one key transfer rule to pay attention in Italy. It's been around for a while, and it regards non-EU players and the limitations imposed during the transfer windows on how many players you can bring in from certain areas. So keep an eye on that, and keep an eye on your transfer policies when managing in Italy. Now, Serie B, on the surface, looks very similar to the top level, follows a very similar structure. There are 20 teams and 38 league games, but things do get a little bit more complicated around promotion and relegation. The top 2, they're automatically promoted, but there are playoffs, in most cases, for the 3rd promotion place. However, if the 3rd place team finishes 15 points or more ahead of the 4th place team, then the playoffs are scrapped and they get automatically promoted. In every other case, there are 6 teams that go into the playoffs, so 3rd all the way down to 8th, with the 3rd and 4th teams gaining byes into the semi-finals. The preliminary round, so 5th down to 8th, is just a single leg, with the potential for extra time, but if the game is still level, the higher placed team in the league just advances. There's no penalties. The semi-finals are 2-leg ties, and again, if scores are level on aggregate, the higher placed team is moving forward into the final, which is the same, except that if scores are level and the 2 teams finish the season on the same points, then we get extra time and penalties. So if they finished level, if 3rd and 4th get to the final and they finish level on points, there's extra time and penalties. It doesn't matter who finished 3rd. Okay, and it's the same for 16th and 17th getting into a playoff for relegation. The bottom 3 teams are automatically relegated. 16th and 17th have a play-out, unless 16th place team finishes 5 or more clear of 17th, which makes the playoff null and void. But that relegation playoff is a 2-legged tie with the same aggregate rules being enforced as the promotion playoff final, so the lower ranked team gets relegated unless they were on equal points in the league, in which case it's extra time and penalties being enforced. Now, if you followed all of that, we're about to get a little bit more complex as we move down to Serie C, which I'm going to call Serie C because I've got terrible pronunciation and I've probably butchered it already. There are 60 teams at this level across 3 regional divisions with 20 teams in each group. So that means that each group has a 38-game season. Now, the 3 group winners are automatically promoted to Serie B, and they all subsequently face off in the Supercoppa Serie C. So there's like the 3 winners face each other to get an ultimate overall winner, but they all get promoted anyway, so don't worry. There's also a Coppa Italia Serie C cup competition, which feeds into the massive playoff structure, which we're going to cover very soon. But we'll cover the Coppa Italia Serie C in a second. But speaking of playoffs, 9 teams from each group, so 2nd all the way down to 10th, go into the playoffs at various stages, which we'll cover. And then the 28th team, so that's 9 in each of the 3 groups, the 28th team in the playoffs is the winner of the Coppa Italia Serie C. If they've also qualified in one of the other positions or won the group, that extra place bumps down in their group. So if you're in Group A and you finish first and you win the Coppa Italia Serie C, your place basically drops down, and there's 11th in the. There's 28 teams in total, 10 from one group, 9 from the other two, depending on who wins the Coppa Italia Serie C. We're going to consider when we go through it that the cup winner doesn't qualify for the playoffs any other way. So they finish 11th in one of their groups. That's fine. We'll cover that scenario, and you can shuffle around the places and where you fall in. It's a mess, so don't worry. If you finish in the top 10 in your group, you've got a chance at promotion. So let's take a deep breath. Let's cover the playoff as best as we can. There are 6 rounds. The first 2 are regional. The next 2 are national. The final 2 are the final 4. So the first 2 rounds remain in the league groups, and they're all single games hosted by the higher ranked team. And if the scores are level, that higher ranked team advances without extra time or penalties. They just go through. The first round pairs 5th against 10th, 6th against 9th, and 7th against 8th in each group. Now, the winners of those 3 games are then paired in the second round. The 4th place team comes in. So it's 4th place against the worst remaining team, and then the best remaining team against the second best. So they're paired off like that. And again, it's the same single game. Top ranked team goes through if it's level. This leaves us with 2 teams per group advancing, so 6 in total, which goes through to the national phase, which is the third round. They're 2-leg ties with the higher ranked or seeded team playing at home in the second leg, and then they advance in the result of an aggregate draw. So the 6 teams that advance from the second round are then joined by the 3 third-place teams and the Coppa Italia Serie C winner. They're all ranked, and then 5 are seeded. And then of those 5 ties, the winners advance to the quarterfinals, and they're joined by the 3 second-place teams, and the winners of that advance to the final 4, which sees the semi-finals and final once again being 2-legged ties, but this time league position is thrown out of the window. If it's level, we go to extra time and penalties if the draw on aggregate is level. And ultimately, after all of that, only one of the 28 playoff teams gets promoted, which is incredibly nerve-wracking and confusing, and what a way to end the season. If you manage to get promoted through the playoffs in Serie C, you've done something pretty amazing. Right, we're nearly done with Serie C, but we do need to talk about relegation down to the unplayable Serie D. Now, 1 team in each group is automatically relegated, so that's 3 teams down, gone already. And then in each group there are a potential 4 teams that head into relegation playouts. Now, the 16th place team faces the 19th place team, with the 17th against the 18th, unless there is a 9-point or more gap between the teams in each playout, which cancels it out, and the bottom-ranked team gets relegated. So, the playouts are 2-legged, with the higher-ranked team playing at home in the second leg, and if aggregate scores are level, the lower-ranked team is just relegated. And there we go. So, there are 3 teams in each group going down, 9 in total, down to Serie D, which isn't playable, thankfully, because I'm sure that has got a very complicated system in place as well. Now, after all of that playoff structure, which has confused everyone and given you all a headache, we're going to shift focus to the domestic cup competitions now, with the Coppa Italia, the full Coppa Italia. The winner gains a European place into the Europa League, unless they've also qualified for the Champions League via the league, and then that place drops into the league, and 7 teams from the league go through. The places shuffle around, as you'd expect. Now, there are only 44 teams in the Coppa Italia, all teams from Serie A and Serie B, plus 4 teams from the Serie C. So the bottom 8 ranked teams, so that's 4 from Serie B and the 4 Serie C teams, enter into the preliminary round, and then in the first round they're joined by the remaining 16 Serie B teams plus 12 from Serie A, and then the Serie A teams that haven't joined, the remaining 8 teams, they join in the third round. So each round is a single leg, thankfully, with extra time and penalties, apart from the semi-finals, which are 2-legged. So thankfully, the Coppa Italia is pretty straightforward. And then the final cup competition that we've kind of already touched on is the Coppa Italia Serie C, which is just more complex for Serie C. So the first round sees 56 of the 60 teams enter, and then the 4 teams who also entered the full Coppa Italia join in the second round. And each round is a single leg, apart from the semi-finals and final, which are 2-legged, and we've already discussed the complex mess of what awaits you if you win the Coppa Italia Serie C. So I think we can probably leave the playoffs and the cup competitions there and move on to 5 fantastic save ideas for Italy across the multiple levels of playable football. Now, as has become tradition with these guides, we're going to begin with the defending champions, AC Milan. Now, Milan aren't quite the most successful team in Italy. They've won 19 league titles, which is joint second with their city rivals Internazionale, behind only the old lady, Juventus, who've got 36, so they're quite away from everyone else. Milan have, however, won 7 Champions League titles over the years, and probably enjoyed their most successful spell as a club in the late 80s through most of the 90s, essentially. But league success hasn't really been as frequent as it once was. There's only been 2 Serie A titles, including the most recent one, in the last 20 years. So your aim is going to be to use the great resources and facilities of the club to create a new dynasty in Italian football and build on those 7 Champions League wins and maybe catch Juventus with 36 league titles. But that is something that didn't happen in the real season that's just, well, not finished yet. But we've got the club next who have ran away with the Serie A title in the 22-23 campaign, and that's Napoli. They began the season having not won the Scudetto since 1990, and that was the era that saw them break the world transfer record in 1984 when they signed Diego Maradona from Barcelona. He led them to 2 league titles and a UEFA Cup, but after that success, the club kind of went a bit downhill and then into freefall as bankruptcy saw them relegated down to Serie C in 2004. Now, despite being in the 3rd tier, they had a higher average attendance than most of Serie A, and essentially that massive, fierce Neapolitan support meant it was inevitable that they'd resurge and come back up to the top flight. Since their return to the top flight, they have won 3 Coppa Italias, been a staple of European competition, and now they've just clinched their 3rd league title in the season that's not quite finished yet, the first season of this game. And that's your target. You've got to win the league, build on success, and take them back to the very top. Now, we're going to drop down to Serie B, for a team which has often been featured on this channel and all of my videos, mainly because the shirt is there, that distinctive pink shirt. It's Palermo, it's hung behind my head in most videos, and they're a Sicilian side that came to national prominence in the early 2000s as they were promoted to Serie A and became a regular fixture in the competition and in Europe over the next 10 years, which is why I've got their shirt, because, you know. The success didn't last, however, with financial issues, new owners, league exclusions, seeing them demoted from Serie B all the way down to Serie D, despite finishing 3rd place in that season in Serie B. But back-to-back promotions followed, and the club were then taken over by the City Football Group, who own Manchester City and about a dozen other clubs around the world, placing them back in Serie B for this new season. So your target must be to return them to Serie A and eventually Europe, before maybe working towards the club's first ever Scudetto. Now, we're going to stay in Serie B with one of the many fallen giants of Italian football. There are loads of them littered around. But this is Parma, and this side have never actually won the Scudetto, but they have had lots of success in Europe. They've won 2 UEFA Cups and a Cup Winners' Cup in the 1990s, and since that peak, the club have gone bankrupt and been reborn twice, with the most successful the most recent rebirth, and the most successful, being in 2015. Parma then became the first Italian club to gain 3 successive promotions to return to Serie A just 3 seasons after bankruptcy. Now, the road hasn't been straightforward since then. It's not been easy. They have been relegated back to Serie B, as we've said, but they do have new American owners now in place, and they are among the top teams in the division with their eyes firmly set on promotion. And your task is to take them back to Serie A, bring them back to European success, and win the Scudetto for the first time ever. But it's not the first time ever for the next club, because we're speaking of bringing back successors, and this is going to be a club that's been on the fallen giants list of Italian football since before everyone here was born. It's one of the longest tenured fallen giants. It's Pro Vercelli, and they're in Serie C. Now, Pro Vercelli were the first ever dominant side of Italian football. They won 7 league titles between 1908 and 1922. But for the last 100 years, they've been out in the wilderness. There was a 64-year period where they were outside of the top 2 divisions, bouncing around between Serie C and the amateur leagues being professional and amateur, basically just jumping around over a 64-year period. But there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and that came in 2011 when they got promoted back to Serie B for the first time in 64 seasons. But a number of promotions and relegations then followed, and the once great club are now back in Serie C, but they've got so much history and the narrative is there. It's well placed for you to come in, take the side back to the very top of Italian football and claim an 8th Scudetto for the first time in over 100 years for Provercelli. And that is it. That's the whistle-stop tour of Italian football on Football Manager. 5 great save ideas, and if you are familiar with either real-life Italian football or you've managed in the game a lot and you've got through that complicated playoff system, let us know in the comments. Head down to the comments, share your thoughts, your feelings, your stories, your corrections. Make fun of my pronunciations, because there's bound to have been some terrible ones in there. Do it all in the comments, and whilst you're there, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out the league, guys. This is the 10th one we've done here. The playlist will be coming up very, very soon, and I'll see you on that next video.